Good afternoon, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. And today we're about to look at a very important topical matter in the light of Charlie Kirk's assassination. Now, we have been hearing much about that, and I'm going to look at the specific topic, Charlie Kirk's death and free speech crisis, Caribbean wake-up call. And this interview will be done with Fred Corbin. Charlie Kirk's shocking death has raised serious questions about freedom of speech in America and what it means for the Caribbean. In this powerful discussion, Fred Corbin joins me to break down: is Israel influencing America's free speech crisis? How censorship in the US impacts Jamaica, Trinidad, and the wider Caribbean? Why Caribbean nations must pay attention before it's too late? This isn't just an American story, it's a Caribbean wake-up call. Watch until the end as Fred Corbin exposes the global forces shaping our region's future. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more hard-hitting analysis on Caribbean politics and global affairs. So we will be joined now by Fred Corbin. I shall invite him into the studios with Fred Corbin, and we will begin the interview forthwith. Good morning, Mr. Corbin. Can you hear me?
Good morning, Andrew. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing very well, thank you. And how are you doing this morning?
Fantastic. What's going on?
I'm here, not sure I'm doing fantastic, but I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I'm surviving.
Awesome.
No, yes, and thank you for the interview that you sent me yesterday on your podcast. It was very revealing, and maybe one of these days we should be looking at that very topic, the consolidation of political power. Because I think that is, you dealt with it in the light of Barbados, but I think that I would like to see it in light of the global dynamic, the consolidation of political powers, because that's what we're seeing in the world now. Now, today we're going to be looking at, as I told them, on Charlie Kirk's assassination and what are some of the implications for us in the Caribbean region. Now, Mr. Corbin, how do you assess the impact of Charlie Kirk's death on US political discourse and conservative activism?
Well, that's a very interesting question, Andrew, and thank you for bringing that perspective to our audience,
Yes.
simply because it is very easy for the audience who is looking at the situation from outside of the United States domestic political arena to judge it based on the media circus. And what we have to recognize is that there is a long-standing series of events behind every single assassination that has ever taken place politically within the United States of America, going as far back as Abraham Lincoln. And we have to understand also that Mr. Kirk, while he was a Make America Great Again supporter, and a very close ally of President Trump, he found himself on the wrong side of the most powerful criminal enterprise on the planet, and that is the APAC lobby. And when he found himself in that position, he recognized the fact that his life could be in grave danger. Not only that, but you have to recognize that he was led into that set of circumstances because he was challenging the narrative of the left.
Mhm.
And the Democratic left of the United States of America has had a very, very long standing relationship with assassination, going all the way back to John F. Kennedy. And while Kennedy himself was a Democrat, he challenged the narrative. And the famous speech given at the media conference held in New York City, where he outlined and exposed the great challenges as well as the orchestration of US domestic foreign and foreign policy that was taking place behind the scenes. That was his last speech that led to his assassination in Dallas.
Mhm.
And we look at the similarities between JFK's assassination and the similarities between Mr. Kirk's assassination, and the same playbook was put in place,
Mm-hmm.
where you had two shooters and you had a situation where one shooter got away scot-free, the other one was used as a patsy, and now you have the maelstrom of the media narratives as well as independent people all swirling around an issue that has only one signature to it, and that is a state-sponsored assassination.
Mm-hmm.
And that state-sponsored assassination came directly from Israel.
Yes, yes. Wow. That's interesting. Now, in what ways do events like this signal shifts in freedom of speech landscape in the United States? Do you think that there's going to be a shift now in terms of who is allowed to speak what?
Well, I think it signals to the American public that the shift is taking place not in their best interest,
Mm-hmm.
and by extension, the rest of the world,
Mm-hmm.
because most of our communications platforms, as well as the ability for social media to operate with the leverage as well
Yes.
as the freedom that it does enjoy, has traditionally been based on US based platforms.
Mm-hmm.
And what we are seeing happening right now with the Larry Ellison from Oracle takeover and buyout of TikTok, which took place yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
we're seeing a situation now happening where the second largest social media platform is now completely under the control of the Zionists.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And following on the heels of a Zionist state-sponsored assassination, which was directly admitted to by the head rabbi of Israel, you have a situation developing where we now have the second largest um, social media platform, which is revered across the world as the ability for displaced, pressured, oppressed populations to communicate without any interference. Now that has been interdicted. And Larry Ellison of Oracle is a well-known sponsor of the organization called Friends of the IDF, which is the
Mm-hmm.
Israel Defense Forces.
Mm-hmm.
And he's donated well over $100 million to that operation,
Yeah.
and so on. And he is personal friends with Netanyahu. So what do we have here? We have the implementation and the progress toward a Zionist-controlled media empire that is about to stand on the global stage and run head on into the East, because Larry Ellison's son is about to buy CNN, and that's going to happen this week. All right. So when you have a takeover of the second largest social media company in TikTok and then CNN, what do you have? You have a complete disenfranchisement of probably 15% of the globe in social media content being directed to the narrative.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's where we stand. But the
And let me
world must understand, the world must understand that state-sponsored assassination is what took place in the incident with Mr. Kirk.
Yes. And what Mr. Corbin has also not mentioned is that our mainstream media, whether it's the Gleaner or the Barbados Nation or, the Trinidad and Guardian, we get our news from these mainstream media, the CNNs and the Fox News and the Guardians and so forth. So that is something critical for us to watch and observe and see what happens here to from. Now, Israel's role in this sort of, you've mentioned some things about Israel. There are claims that Israel may have had a role in shaping political or media pressures in America. From your perspective, I think you have mentioned it. How plausible is this? You are thinking that Israel is about to take over America's media landscape. Is that true?
Well, it has already taken over the media landscape
Yes.
because every single media company in the United States of America is owned by them.
Yes. Yes.
What they're doing is exactly what I described yesterday in my podcast: consolidation of media power.
Yes.
And once you control the media, as Joseph Goebbels, of the former Nazi SS commander, he said, "Give me control of the media, and I will have control of a population.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that the Zionists have had a wealth of experience during World War II because they were the sponsor of Adolf Hitler,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where the term NAZI comes from, Nazi, which
Mm-hmm.
is Hitler's National Alliance and the Zionist Party.
Mm-hmm.
And the Zionist bankers sponsored Adolf Hitler, and the media was the second largest, most heavily contributed to department of the Nazi SS
Mm-hmm.
because the media was used to control the narrative. Adolf Hitler, Winston Churchill himself was actually caught out on more than one occasion by false information and misinformation, and led to the loss of life of Allied forces because of the media power of the SS. And what we're seeing happening right now in the United States of America is the most dangerous progression towards fascist tyranny that we will ever experience in our lifetime.
Wow.
Because once you control the media on a Zionist ticket, you are stepping into the arena of a global dystopian one world government where everything that anyone wants to think or wants to say will be contributing to the global narrative of misinformation and disinformation toward a Zionist overall control mechanism.
Now, how do these international actors, Mr. Corbin, influence domestic politics in the US? Well, I think you've said that, but perhaps in the Caribbean region. What lessons do you think and what signals we have to look out for?
Well, the I think the core competency that we do have in the Caribbean, we still do have in the Caribbean, is that we have a large percentage of our social media population who do still have the ability to think for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
However, as I said, all of the platforms that we use in the Caribbean are the same platforms that are going to be controlled by the Zionist takeover. So no longer will have the freedom of being able to do the kind of examples where we spread the truth, knowledge, and education as we would like.
Mm-hmm.
And the perspective that we have to expect from Caribbean media houses who are tied into relationships with these larger media houses. And I draw example to the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation here in Barbados, who has
Mm-hmm.
been sold to MSNBC.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, the the reason that that is so dangerous for Barbadians, because I'm speaking about Barbados because this is where I am,
Correct.
is that the CBC operation has been the primary voice of the incumbent to be able to influence public perception and thinking for many, many, many years. When we first started out with Rediffusion, and then when it progressed then to monochrome, black and white TV, and then it progressed to color TV. And today, even today in 2025, if you look at this very, very carefully, you cannot make arrangements to meet a Barbadian or an ordinary Barbadian in the evening unless it's after 8 o'clock.
Mm.
And I'll tell you the reason why. The CBC News starts at 7.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a liqueur that has to be taken before dinner. Everybody has to be home by 7 o'clock because they have to get the CBC News.
Same thing in
And
Jamaica,
this
yeah.
is the indicator of how far down the political indoctrination landscape our societies have progressed
Mm-hmm.
when you are totally dependent on a media platform to soak you up in propaganda, misinformation, and outright lies. And
Yes.
what we have here in Barbados is the single greatest compilation of negative influence, propaganda, and absolute misinformation and unintelligent misinformation. Unintelligent misinformation. I want to draw a very clear distinction here.
Mm-hmm.
You have intelligent misinformation, which is deliberately including little snippets of truth with regard to sending someone in a general direction But then you have unintelligent misinformation, which is completely based on one person's opinion without any scientific knowledge behind it. And we saw that through the entire COVID fraud debacle that
Mhm.
encompassed the Caribbean region. In
Yeah.
every single media house across the region, they were saying the same thing. At the end of the day, where do we stand as sovereign nationals of the Caribbean region? Do we are we going to stand up and step forward and say we are sovereign nationals with the ability to think independently and stand on a platform of truth, knowledge, and education for the best interests of our countries?
And I'm not sure if you're watching and you're observing, Mr. Corbin, that when you're reading the news, whether it's coming from the Guardian out of Trinidad or from the Gleaner or from the Barbadian the Nation, you're getting the same news and it's almost like verbatim,
Mhm.
and you're saying, why can't you choose another word? You think differently. You are going to write a story in a different way. We know when we're going to school, if you're writing the same story verbatim of your classmate, the teacher is going to mark you down or going to fail you. So why are we seeing our journalists copying and pasting news from each sources? What do you think?
Well, first of all, we have to look at the history of journalism. Let us look at the history of journalism because journalism was a revered profession and
Yes.
a professional profession when it was established. And the reason that it was established as a professional profession was because it had to answer directly to the king. That's where the history of journalism comes from. Because if you gave the king wrong information, you would lose your head
Hmm.
or you were consigned to the Tower of London and or you were banished to some faraway land that you had no influence. Whereas professional journalism grew around the king's wishes and by extension then became a department of the royal accolade for international and foreign relations. Today, we don't have journalism. We have gossipers who want to latch on to the latest juicy story, embellish it with a few additions of their own, which are completely fictitious, and then put it out there for just to be able to get likes, thumbs up, views, and so on and so forth. And that's what they're making their money off of. This is not journalism. This is stupidity. If
Hmm.
you want real journalism, go and sit down and talk to people like Tucker Carlson,
Hmm.
um, the
Redacted.
yeah, redacted. You go and speak to people in the UK, like the can't remember his name right now. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is this: journalism has come down to a very thin line, which is constantly being attacked and interdicted for bringing truth, knowledge, and education. I mean, look at my circumstances. Okay. I've been banned off of every single platform you can think of
Yeah.
simply because I brought the facts.
Right.
Okay. I brought the facts. This is what journalism should be.
Hmm.
True journalism is actually being assassinated, literally. And we're seeing it happen in Gaza. We saw 37 journalists in one single house completely assassinated and demolished 2 weeks ago by the Israeli military. 37 lost their lives all in one shot because they were bringing the truth to the public. This is journalism. Our perspective of journalism in the Caribbean is, oh, I ride around with a microphone and a camera and I go into the neighborhoods and talk about somebody's mango tree bursting a pipe or some nonsense. That's not journalism. That's gossip. Let's talk about journalism. Let's sit down and ask the hard questions of the community. What are your daily experiences under a Barbados Labour Party ticket? What are your daily experiences under a JLP ticket? What are your daily experiences under a PNM ticket or a UNC ticket? Okay, this is extremely important. This is journalism because what it's actually doing is that it is giving you a benchmark feedback from the community upon which you can base interactive policy,
Hmm.
intuitive policy to
Hmm.
better the citizens of your own country.
Right. And the whole matter of the professionalization of journalism in the United States, it wasn't a profession for many years. It was,
Oh,
I think it was in the maybe the mid 20th century that they started professionalizing. It was for the working class. The working class were the ones who would go and they would hold the government to account. But now, when it went over to Columbia University and they started professionalizing and they're going to these elite universities, then they started to want to preserve the status quo. And that is what we find our journalists doing right now. They're preserving and as opposed to challenging the status quo. Now, what practical steps can citizens take to ensure their voices are not silenced?
Well, I think we need to learn to write again.
Yeah.
Okay. We need to learn to write again. Unfortunately, because of social media and because it's so easy to type things and use, what I call internet language, nobody actually sits down and takes the time to write properly with proper grammar and
Mhm,
spelling and so on.
mhm,
And I've had letters from government departments that my 11-year-old baby girls would
mhm.
look at in horror
Yes.
and say, "Who wrote this?
Yes.
This is coming from a government department."
Yeah.
You would think a fifth grader would write this nonsense. The
Mhm.
misspelling, the miscommunication. I mean, it is pathetic that our government and governments across the region still do not know how to communicate at a proper secondary school level.
No, they don't.
And
Yeah, they
and
don't. Yeah.
it is absolutely horrendous. And one of the core competencies that we can encourage our population to become involved in is, you remember when you and I were growing up, we had regular spelling bee competitions, we
Yes.
had
Which I practically
regular
did.
literature and
Mm-hmm.
essay competitions, and so on and so forth. And I draw example to the great difference with regard to how parenting can actually influence this. If your parents are willing to sit down and understand that communication with your children
Mm-hmm.
on a person to person level will directly influence their ability to communicate through proper writing, language, grammar, and expression. You have the ability for that child to be able to take something that you may have thought of and not know how to put down on paper
Mm-hmm.
and put it out there for the general public to understand. It's
Mm-hmm.
not that we don't have it, it is not exercised.
Correct.
Okay. And I draw example to the a little girl I was looking after in Grenada.
Mm-hmm.
Children are my number one primary
Priority.
focus.
Mm-hmm.
And this little girl that I was looking after in Grenada, her mom spent a beautiful amount of time, and I mean beautiful amount of time, educating her with regard to speech and so on, even before she went to primary school. She went into primary school and she had a spelling class the second week she was there. She was only 5 years old, and she placed at the top of her class. It was only 14 words, but she got all 14 words correct, 100%. She went on to into the end of primary school, and the Grenada government put out a national English language and English literature competition. There were 1,530 students across the entire country that had to submit an English language and English literature competition.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Just make a guess where she placed. Out of 1,530 students, just
First.
make a guess. No, no, she didn't place first because she was up against fifth form students from
Oh,
secondary schools. She
yes.
placed 12th overall in the nation.
Wow. That's incredible.
Okay? 9 years old.
That's incredible.
There you go. So what I'm saying to you, that's a classic example in my experience, where in close collaboration with her mother and myself, and encouraging, constant encouragement, positive encouragement all the time. Remember, children will always respond to positive encouragement and by
Mhm.
actual practical implementation, and they will thrive. Okay? Our problem in the Caribbean, we have traditionally come up threatening our children with non-performance.
Mhm.
If you don't do this, I'm going to do this. They're so afraid of consequences for underperforming that they shut down entirely.
Yes.
They lose the war that education or the public education has become, because it's a battle. Our public education is absolutely horrendous,
It
and
is.
it thrives on consequences against children rather than encouragement. Okay?
You're
And
correct.
that, by extension, has led to a dearth and a destruction of journalism. So
Now, do you think that Charlie Kirk's death has also some amount of religious political implications? And what are, if there are, what are some of the implications you're seeing, the spiritual, religious slash implications? Because he talked about a lot about morality and, getting religion back with the government, which is a dangerous sort of what precedence, if you will, because he wanted to merge religion with politics now that, he saw the total erosion of morality in the United States. Charlie Kirk. Do you think that is still well, that sort of ideology, that sort of push will continue now after his death?
Well, I'm certainly hoping that the young people who were privileged to listen to his speaking on practical terms,
Mhm.
because he never preached at anybody. He
Yes.
never preached religion to anybody.
Hmm.
He understood very clearly that religion is the greatest division of man and God,
Yes.
and that's what got him killed.
Hmm.
Because the Zionist party just would not tolerate that, simply because the promotion of the communist agenda beginning in 1963 to dismantle the United States of America from within was something that they sponsored wholeheartedly,
Hmm.
where the dysfunction or the disconnection of the family unit, the complete destruction of the educational institutions, the
Hmm.
lobbying of educational institutions to work against parenting, and the destruction of the morality of the public perception through media, pornography, and all the rest of it was part of the Communist Manifesto, which was part of the congressional record of 1963. You can go look it up for yourself.
Yeah. Hmm. Read about.
Okay.
Yeah. Hmm.
The
Now.
most important thing here
Hmm.
is what Mr. Kirk was achieving in waking up the younger generations, or what we call the Gen Z generation of the United States of America,
Hmm.
went against the official Zionist communist narrative. A
Hmm.
lot of people say, well, what are you talking about communists? Well, that's exactly what the Zionists are. They're the true communists. You only have to understand precisely what's happening with the New World Order and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals to understand that this is real communism. Adolf Hitler was the closest to come to true communism. The Soviet Union was just a collection of thugs.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
Thank God that the Soviet Union no longer exists, where it's now been replaced by an Orthodox Christian society in the Russian Federation. But what we do experience are still the building of a communist agenda in the Zionist control of the American political and domestic foreign policy everywhere that America is. Okay.
Isn't Trump, though, that is not touted to being, well, to be a communist? Isn't he also linked with the Zionist movement? Remember that Miriam Adelson, gave him loads of money for his campaign. So what would you say to that?
Well, yes, Trump did take $100 million from Miriam Adelson, who is the 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 director of the AIPAC lobby. But even more egregiously is you have a situation where you have the prime minister of Israel running around the Middle East and telling journalists and so on that he controls Donald Trump and he controls America and so on. And while he's saying it, that may not necessarily be true,
Hmm.
simply because we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. But the
Yes.
public perception in the media is that Benjamin Netanyahu is in control of the United States Congress, in control of Donald Trump and so on.
Hmm.
And to all intents and purposes, you see the U-turn that Donald Trump has just performed with regard to Ukraine and
Hmm.
NATO and so on, and you
Hmm.
see the executive order coming from the president for the Zionist takeover of TikTok and so on and so forth. So what else are the public to believe?
Yeah.
Now, if we are looking at this from that perception, that means that the perspective of the actual facts is so small that it's outside of the public vision. And we have to understand that this is precisely what politics is designed to do.
Hmm.
Keep the perspective so small, but so focused that the public miss it.
Correct.
And they only look at the perception of what
Yeah.
the media portrays.
Hmm. Hmm. Very well said. Very well said, Mr. Corbin. Now, in your view, what role should media academia and civil society play in protecting free speech across the Caribbean? I think that we talk about the education system, and we're saying that they're doing the complete opposite. What role do you think they should play?
Well, the media has an enormous positive role to play if they would shake off the shackles of their control mechanisms and adopt three very simple pillars of society foundations. They are the foundations of society.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually I've said it before. There's six principles upon which I base the progression of what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And the three of those six principles are truth, knowledge, and education.
Yes.
If the media were to focus and let's hypothetically say that you were the CEO of a media corporation. Well, technically you are because you're the commander of your own space on social media, and you were to hire me. You would The first question that I would expect you to ask to put to me is, Fred, what would you like to see with regard to the expansion of media in the Caribbean, which is exactly what you've just asked, what you
Mm-hmm.
just asked me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to say to you, I want to see truth, knowledge, and education become the mantra
Mm-hmm.
of what every media house holds dear with regard to influencing the progression of the communities and society of the Caribbean region. Truth, knowledge, and education, where we speak the truth, we find out what the truth is, we have knowledge with regard to why the truth is the truth, which dispels a fake narrative, and
Mm-hmm.
then the education via the media of the public as to what the facts are. That is where we need to get back to if we are going to influence positively the mindset of our younger generations to be able to take the Caribbean forward into a progressive environment contributing to global prosperity.
Yeah. Yeah. There is an article that was written. I think I sent it to you also this week, by this writer. Let me see if I could pull this up quickly here. If I could get it on the screen. Why this thing is bothering me? And okay, so I have it there. It's by, let me see his name here. The European Age, America at the Precipice of Self-Destruction. And he mentions here that the assassination of Charlie Kirk exemplifies this European dynamic. Ideological polarization has mutated into existential violence, where citizens no longer see one another as rivals in debate, but as mortal threats. The act itself, the reactions it triggered, and the national attention it commanded illustrate the disintegration of civic norms that Madison, Lincoln, and Tocqueville warned about. The boundaries separating disagreement from destruction have collapsed, leaving political discourse unmoored from reason. Each side interprets the event through its own ideological lens, some framing it as martyrdom, others as evidence of societal breakdown, reinforcing the cycle of fear, anger, and suspicion. In this sense, Kirk's death is not an isolated tragedy. It is a vivid manifestation of the European age where society consumes its own members, institutions fail to mediate conflict, and the very concept of a shared reality dissolves. Yet within this self-devouring process lies the possibility of renewal if citizens and leaders can recognize the cycle and act to redirect it. What do you say about that quotation, Mr. Corbin? Do you agree with him?
Well, well, he's correct in one sense, where he outlines very clearly the disconnection of social society. And that
Yes.
comes directly back to what I just outlined with regard to the Communist Manifesto of 1963,
Mhm.
where in the congressional record, they actually call for the active disconnection of the social fabric.
Yes.
And that has been the mantra of the political left in the United States of America, run by the Israel lobby, simply because the Israel lobby gives the impression that they're doing the best for America when really and truly they're dismantling it from the inside. Because why? We have to look at the history of where this Zionist movement has come from.
Hmm.
And that takes us back to biblical times.
Yes.
The Genesis of the Zionists takes us back to biblical times in the tribe of Amalek. All the way through the centuries, right through to the Khazarian Mafia, and that is what we're seeing right now. The Khazarian Mafia, when Joshua took down the walls of Jericho, where did the Amalekites flee to? Present day Ukraine. What's happening in Ukraine today?
Mhm.
The Orthodox Christian nation of the Russian Federation is taking action against the Khazarian Mafia. That's their spiritual home. That's why they can influence President Donald Trump and NATO to fight for their life to preserve it. They don't want to lose Ukraine. That is their spiritual home. This is more of a spiritual conflict, and what that author just outlined is precisely the reaction that is taking place in the power center that's controlling that.
Yes.
America is the power center of that
Hmm.
because they're using the United States military and the power of the Zionist lobby politically to influence the discourse, not only in the public perception, but in the international foreign policy arena.
Yes, yes. Okay, so your final words, we have 3 minutes left. Your final words for the Caribbean in light of all that you've seen happening right now.
Well, I think that what the Caribbean region needs to understand very clearly is that just because the United States of America has a show of force going on in our region does not mean that we are going to be targeted. They have an agenda. We know what the agenda is. They have done this agenda many times before. However, whether it happens the way they want it remains to be seen. I personally don't think it will,
Mhm.
simply because you have larger forces at play behind the scenes that have had 10 years of direct financial influence as well as development influence with regard to the reinforcing of the state of Venezuela. And just because the United States turns up in the Southern Caribbean doesn't mean that people are going to be targeted or we're going to be come under war for wartime conditions or we're going to be bombed or missiles are going to be landing in our streets. No, that's not the case. The most important thing to remember here is that the United States of America is doing precisely what it does best, and that is posturing. Whether it leads to an open conflict remains to be seen. I personally do not want to see that happen. I'm
Right.
not saying it wouldn't happen, but
Hmm.
we have to remember that our positions with regard to the Caribbean as a unified voice must remain consistent. And that is, we stand against aggression, but we do so in a limited fashion that preserves the position of the Caribbean region as being a contributor to the global economy.
Hmm.
Any conflict that comes into our small area of operation will negatively impact us. It doesn't mean that we have to be throwing our hands in the air and panicking. We need to sit down and have clear and concise dialogue, and that's what's going.
Thank you so much, Mr. Corbin. We can end here our very wonderful discussion. It's so much to unpack that, it can't be done in 37 minutes. But another time when we have more time. Can you hear Mr. Corbin? Hello? Hello? What's happening here now? Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you will like, share, and subscribe, like the videos so the videos can be shared with as many people on the platform. Let me see. Wow, I had